At this point of time, you have the portfolio strategic plan, you have the initial portfolio, and you have the portfolio charter. So it's the time to develop a high-level timeline of the portfolio in the develop portfolio roadmap process. Now, portfolio roadmaps are an output of high-level portfolio planning that graphically depicts all portfolio elements needed to achieve the organizational strategy and objectives. So it's a high-level planning exercise which will result in the portfolio roadmap. The roadmap provides a high-level plan which should then be used for identifying both internal and external dependencies. So it's a high-level timeline showing the flow of the portfolio components and how they will be executed, and it will be an amazing tool to determine the dependencies between the portfolio components. The portfolio roadmaps may contain both program level and project level roadmaps included in the scope of the portfolio. So the components of the portfolio and their timelines or roadmaps will be part of the portfolio roadmap. Roadmaps might not provide details of all identified portfolio components at the onset. However, they may be used to build details later. So it's only a high-level plan. The roadmap shows alignment from the components to the strategic objectives, or it highlights the gaps between the components and the strategic objectives that need to be analyzed. And I had one question in my PFMP exam asking about which of the following is the best document you can use in order to highlight any potential gaps between the components and the strategic objectives that should be analyzed. This is the portfolio roadmap. Also, it will support mapping of portfolio milestones and dependencies and identifies the challenges and risks of the portfolio. It can be used to communicate the linkage between the organization strategy and portfolio management, and it is used by the governance processes to determine when new components should be initiated during the portfolio life cycle. Now, the roadmap can also provide a high-level prioritization mapping of the portfolio components over time. It forms the initial basis on which dependencies are established, both within the portfolio and externally, so they can be tracked. External dependencies are those dependencies between organization areas which are outside of the portfolio. So you can determine the internal dependencies, which are the ones within the portfolio components, in addition to the external dependencies with other functions or departments in the organization. The inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs of this process are shown in this figure. You will need the portfolio strategic plan, the portfolio charter, and the portfolio. You will need the interdependencies analysis, or you will use, the interdependency analysis, the cost-benefit analysis, and the prioritization analysis. And the key output of this process will be the portfolio roadmap. Now, the data flow diagram of this process showing that we will use the outputs of the develop portfolio strategic plan process, the portfolio strategic plan and the portfolio. We will use also the output of the develop portfolio charter process to create the portfolio roadmap that will be archived in the portfolio documents, and it will be an important input to the managed strategic change process. The first input will be the portfolio strategic plan, which will reflect the organizational goals, objectives, and strategies necessary to enable alignment of the portfolio roadmap. It will provide the portfolio prioritization model, which is the key section of the portfolio strategic plan that establishes the guidelines to prioritize portfolio component, which will enable the portfolio roadmap to be built. The second input is the portfolio charter, which is needed to understand the portfolio structure, the high-level scope, constraints, dependencies, resources, and high-level timeline in order to create the portfolio roadmap. One of the important sections of the portfolio structure is the high-level timeline, which will be the main input in order to develop the portfolio roadmap. The portfolio components and related information should be referenced to define the portfolio roadmap, and this information will be part of the portfolio itself. Examples of information referenced are prioritization, dependencies, and organization areas. The tools and techniques while developing the portfolio roadmap, starting with the interdependency analysis. It should identify the dependencies the portfolio may have in relationship to other portfolios or to the portfolio environment. Dependencies to be analyzed may include resources, finance, quality, risks, timelines, etc. Participants in this analysis may include executive level and other key stakeholders. So you need to analyze the dependencies as part of developing the portfolio roadmap through conducting the interdependency analysis, and you need to investigate any potential dependencies between the portfolio components or between your portfolio and other portfolios. Cost-benefit analysis, which is a technique that quantifies estimated costs and benefits and lists qualitative considerations of alternative portfolio components for evaluation in order to determine the best course of action. So when you are comparing two scenarios of portfolio mix of components and you need to select the best scenario, you can rely on the cost-benefit analysis, which is a technique used to compare the costs to the benefits expected from a portfolio component. And the last technique will be the prioritization analysis. The portfolio manager will compare strategic objectives, prioritize objectives, and perform strategic assessment against the current enterprise portfolios. Now, the key output of this process is the portfolio roadmap, and this is an example shown in front of you. Here are the portfolio components. Here are the key milestones in addition to the timeline. So this is an example of a high-level portfolio roadmap showing all the portfolio components. The portfolio roadmap should provide the high-level strategic direction and information in a chronological view for portfolio management execution and enable dependencies within the portfolio to be established and evaluated. In the example shown, the high-level timeline appears across the top of the structure, which is here, and the portfolio components are listed in the first column. So this is an example of the portfolio roadmap, which will be the key output of the developed portfolio roadmap process. So far, as an outcome of the portfolio strategic management processes, we have the portfolio strategic plan, the portfolio charter, and the portfolio roadmap. It's very important to memorize the key components of these documents for the PFMP exam.